Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace. Please like, share, and subscribe to my videos here on Vimeo as well as YouTube, as well as visit my website, thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Tonight here on the Pace Report, I had the honor and privilege of breaking bread with a pianist as well as an arranger and also an educator by the name of Laurence Hobgood. Now, Lawrence's name sounds very familiar in the jazz world because Laurence was the music director for Grammy Award-winning vocalist Kurt Elling for almost 20 years. Now, this gentleman has recorded a string of trio recordings, but he also recorded a new project which is out now titled Tesseterra, which features his trio with the Ethel String Quartet. And what he's done on this recording is he's taken some very American original songs from the great rock and roll as well as American songbook and has accompaniment by Ethel, the String Quartet. Now, he tackles songs ranging from Jim Webb's Wichita Lineman to the Police's Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic. But I had a chance to sit down with him briefly to talk about, one, why he decided to do this project and revision some of these great classics, as well as how he wrote, as well as had the arrangements to accompany his trio, as well as sit down and talk about his origins playing in Chicago. As you might know, Mr. Elling as well as Mr. Hobgood cut their teeth in the music world at the famous Green Mill Jazz Club in Chicago. Also, we had a chance to sit down and talk about and reflect the life of one of his heroes, Mr. Keith Jarrett. Now, tonight's performance was taken at the official record release performance at the Rubin Museum here in New York City, and accompanying Mr. Hobgood with his trio is the Solar String Quartet. So sit back, relax, and enjoy highlights of Mr. Laurence Hobgood and his trio featuring the Solar String Quartet live at the Rubin Museum of Art here in New York City as part of the Pace Report here in New York City. I was very, very surprised by the performance at the Rubin, performing all of these songs. And I have to ask you, where were you mentally when you were writing the string arrangements for a lot of these songs?
Mentally, I'm not sure if it's the category of answer that you were looking for. For me, writing for string quartet involves immersion in what you could call the creative contrapuntal universe. And so the process for selecting the tune, the process for kind of deciding how I'm going to approach that tune, uh, that's that's more that's more like in the shower, on the bicycle. Usually, really, that kind of stuff happens. Sometimes this happens when I'm playing in practice mode, and I'll just pick something and I'll start working with it and think about the lyric. The lyrics are really important to me, and so even though there's nobody singing with the Tesseterra performance, I want the way that we're performing the songs to reflect the meaning of the lyric. But when it comes to actually being in the writing, I think of it as being real zen, because you have to be just in this moment. You just have to be hearing the music in your head, how it's going to sound in real time, to know how much space to use, to know where to put, what the strings should be doing, what should the rhythm section be doing. It's the skills of arranging, or being able to slow things down, hear it in your head the way it needs to be, put that, I still say, on the paper, put that in the computer. And so that's where my head's at, is just this, it's counterpoint. String quartet is, each voice, there are double stops and there are weird little effect things you can do, but pretty much 98% of it is each part is playing one note. So it's the ultimate expression. It's one of the ultimate expressions of real contrapuntal thinking. And that's you go to a place when you're writing that way that's a little bit different than if you're writing for rhythm section.
Everyone knows you with your association with Kurt Elling and how you were his music arranger, and you've led your trio, and now you're leading a string quartet. There's a classical component to this, but there's still a jazz component to this. And what I noticed on that band stage at the museum was that the string section was very, very free and very, very outside of the box to these contemporary songs.
Yeah, well, you try to write the arrangement once you've found the aural palette, which in this case is that mixture of the piano, bass, drum trio, which is a thing for reasons unto itself. The reason that those three instruments just go together, and it's a sound. You add string quartet to that, especially if it's really going to function as a string quartet and not just as a bunch of longbows and playing pads, because you get that. Every string quartet I work with talks about projects that they've done where it wasn't really string quartet writing, it was string section writing, and they did it for string quartet. But if they're functioning rhythmically and phrase, as I like to say, gesturally within the music, and the coordination of that with the trio has successfully resulted in there being just a certain sound unto itself, then that's the idea that would be something that would be perceptible as free, or maybe another way to say that is making it look easy, making it like it's not an uncomfortable fit. This is a pair of shoes that's been worn before and the person likes wearing them, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's the idea, is to write it that way.
Laurence, do you always hear strings when you're playing any kind of music, whether it be jazz or whether it be rock? Was there always a point in your life where you always wanted to write with strings accompanying what you were trying to?
Well, you just asked two different questions. So no, I don't always hear strings. No. A lot of times I don't hear any strings at all. But the answer to the second question, which was slightly different, is that yeah, I've always, the first assignment that, if this is just my opinion, it was true where I was, which was the University of Illinois. But if you're in a composition class as an undergraduate, the first real test is here: write a string quartet. You got to be able to write a string quartet. It's the litmus test for whether you can think contrapuntally. And successful harmonic thinking depends on your being able to think contrapuntally. You have to be able to envision the aural events that are happening in the music linearly as well as vertically. And if you can't do that, then you're never going to fully understand harmony and the way it works. And if you don't understand that, then the larger, frankly, more important task of then assigning all that information rhythmically, you'll never get there. So string quartet is one of, brass choir is another one. Anything like that where really each voice is going to be very independent from the others much of the time. There's hardly any doubling that goes on at all. When there is doubling, you really notice it because you've got the viola and the first violin are playing the same part for a couple of bars, and it makes it stand out because you got two people playing the same thing. The rest of the time, it's very, very contrapuntal. I love string quartet, and I love doing that. And just to say it, it's a thing I understand. I'm good at that, so I want to do it. And then I will say that the fact that the Lincoln Center project that won Kurt a Grammy in 2010, and because I was on that, I got a Grammy too. Actually, because of being a producer of that record was why I got the Grammy. I debuted an early version of Tesseterra at an APAP showcase, and Yamaha heard it, and that's how I became a Yamaha artist. So that's kind of what pushed me in the direction of this being the next project.
Laurence, why did you choose Ethel of all the string quartets? Was it because of the affiliation with the project you did with Kurt Elling, or was it you knew that these were the capable musicians to execute what you had envisioned for this music?
Well, largely, I'd never been out of touch with them since that project, and I performed with them a few times. And the real key is that for the recording, I really wanted this is my made-up term, but I would call it a bonded string quartet, meaning a real string quartet that functions as a string quartet. Those four people, and has been so for some years. There's always some turnaround in that world, just like anything else, but that is subtly different from the Solar Quartet, which does also sometimes function as a string quartet, but my perception is not in as quite a serious way. They did great. They sounded great.
They did.
But Ethel, those guys are joined at the hip, and that's the string quartet that I knew that plays at that level. So it just it worked out.
let's talk about some of your old stomping grounds, the Green Mill in Chicago. Chicago's been kind of like your home, away from home, because that was where the music world got a hold of you and Kurt Elling. What was it about the Green Mill, and what is the Green Mill to a lot of the music fans out there who have never heard about the Green Mill?
Well, to me, the Green Mill is home. And I'm very fortunate to be able to say that. There's a lot of people that love to play at the Mill, but they didn't start doing it in 1988. And I just had my 30-year anniversary weekend playing there this past December. It's hard, I guess, to really fully pin it down, but obviously just the physical, visual presentation of the place and the accompanying feel of the place are a huge part of what makes it what it is. For instance, it's not acoustically bad, but it is not. It's not the Bim House in Amsterdam, or I always think of that place before I think any place else in terms of just amazing sound in the room. So it's not. It's as my friend Dave, the owner, would say, it's a joint. You know, it's no watering hole, but it's just got this energy. And I mentioned Dave for a reason, because frankly, I don't know how you answer your question without recognizing him, because the energy of the Mill, everything about its character and its modern incarnation, since he reopened it as what it is in 1985. Everything about it is him. If you know him, that's the Mill, and the fact that he got it's even things like it's got the late night license. I mean, this place is open until 4 a.m, 6 nights a week, and the only reason it's not open until 4 a.m, the 7th night of the week, is because that night is open until 5 a.m. Okay, so place has a vibe. It's just got. It's got a very special vibe, and it's my favorite place to play in the whole world, no question.
How'd you land in Chicago, of all places? Because you moved around, and how did Chicago become the incubator of Laurence Hobgood's musicianship?
Well, I guess it was mostly because my family lived downstate Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. My father was the chairman of the theater program at Illinois, and we were very close family. And I was really conscious of the fact that I wasn't always going to be able to spend time with my mom and my dad, and that they were, there's a shelf life there, So, and also, just to be completely candid, we're talking about the mid '80s, early '80s, when I might have first moved away in about '82 or '83. I didn't. I stayed in the college town and just kind of worked some stuff out, and then I moved to Chicago in '88. And by that time, I had visited there enough times I just felt really comfortable there. It was a comfortable fit for me, and the other two choices at that time would have been New York or LA, and that just wasn't as comfortable, and it was further away from the family. It wasn't organic enough for me, so Chicago just defaulted to be the place.
Patricia Barber, she was another alumni of the Green Mill. There are a lot of musicians that came out of there. The legendary NEA jazz master, God rest his soul, Von Freeman.
Von Skis. Oh, man. I loved that guy. I did. And I got to play with him a fair amount. It was a real honor. I was very fortunate playing with a lot of the elder statesmen. I got to play with Von. I got to play with Eddie Johnson. I got to play with Wilbur Campbell, the great drummer, the chief. I got to play with another, I'll never forget, there was a drummer named Robert Berry who was a total field player. So when you play an up-tempo, the way he played 2 and 4, it was not analytical. So it forced you to just feel it which at that tempo and faster than what I was just snapping actually is not easy to do. It was an education playing with those guys, man. Robert Shy, who just passed away somewhat recently, and the younger people, Ed Peterson, who I first played, at least primetime gigs anyway, at the Mill. I played with Ed, and so many of these. Johnny Frigo. I got to play with Johnny Frigo a lot. We used to play duets down in the lobby of the Sheraton Hotel. We'd be in our tux, just me and Johnny Frigo, just going at it. People going, "What is going on here?" He was hilarious. That was really fun. It was an honor. It was an honor to get to play with those guys. And Von, as Kurt used to call him, and it's an appropriate moniker of the great squealing rabbi.
There you go.
The great squealing rabbi.
I read The Art of the Piano Trio, and I won the Deems Taylor Award. And one of your heroes is this pianist. He's complicated in a myriad of issues, because he takes what he does very serious, but his approach is a little bit helter-skelter. That's the word I need to describe it, because no other musician kind of plays like this guy. Explain why this pianist has sketched such a very, very, very important niche in you musically.
Okay, well, you're talking about Keith Jarrett, and my answer would be this. I think that creativity is very misunderstood in a number of ways. One of the ways is that we live in a culture where philosophically we are very, very left brain dominant, the analytical side of the brain. And so it becomes, you hear people say, well, the left brain is the analytical side and the right brain is the intuitive side. And then people associate that with creativity, and it's like, this is it's really an oversimplification, mainly in that both sides of the brain have creativity. There's a very, very high form of purely analytical creativity. And the truth of the matter is there's crossover always, okay? But this is just my observation from a lot of reading and opinion forming from listening to music over the years. So I'm not, I don't have a PhD in physics or anything like that, or neuroscience, but I know what I think about this issue, and that is that when you hear a certain player, you kind of hear whether they are, which type of creativity is dominant in them. So to go to an example, for me, Chick Corea, staggering, probably savant level genius, but his dominant process is very, very analytical. He's kind of the embodiment.
His writing, whew, I mean,
it's incredibly complex. He's kind of the embodiment of super, super high level analytical creativity, and I don't mean to say he doesn't use his right brain, but it's not the dominant force. With Jarrett, it's the opposite. It's just the way his mind works. His deep study of music manifests itself in a very just sort of spontaneous way. If you read the liner notes to Tesseterra, I make a comment in there about equating the very thing we're talking about with visual art. You see a Van Gogh, you know it right away. You see a Monet, you know it right away. They're very different. And there are probably some people out there that would like to argue about which one is better and for what technical reasons and this and that. I personally think that's kind of silly. I think they're both amazing. So I guess what I'm roundabout trying to say is that one of the reasons I identify with Keith, despite his social reputation, which I have experienced myself one time in particular, and that's just one of those things in the arts. I know of a lot of people that I would describe as jazz holes, and everybody has their own experiences with people, but the overall rep that somebody gets becomes what it is. I'm sure I've got one too with whoever. But I think you have to learn how to separate that from the great music that people make. Now, with Jared, it's interesting because a lot of people have a real hard time with his humming, all his vocalization, or what you could call sub-vocalization.
He's very physical.
He's very physical. He did this record called Spirits that he recorded in his barn in New Jersey, if I remember the story correctly. And he's not playing any piano on it at all. It's all percussion and flutes and different things like that. And I read an interview that he did about that where he talked about how he finally had to do that because he thought that as amazing an instrument as it is, the limitations of the piano, the fact that you're not actually hearing a wind-driven sound, you're hearing a string vibration. The notes are preset. You can't bend notes or anything like that. I do believe that he's a guy who can't help but infuse what he's doing with this deeper experience that he's having. And that has parallel in a lot of different categories. For one thing, even when I'm teaching, even young people that are still relative beginners, in fact, that's the best time to hit them with this kind of an idea. I try to get them to see the difference between playing what you're singing and singing what you're playing. You know, the hands should be subservient to the head and the heart, not the other way around. But that means that if what the head and the heart want to express has any complexity at all, the hands are going to have to be very highly trained. And it's real easy to get into habits where your hands just want to do certain things. And ultimately, any analysis will show that there are patterns that some form of them tend to repeat with any given player. Brad Meldo's got certain things he's going to do. Joey Calderazzo's got certain things he's going to do. Herbie has got certain things he's going to do. Tatum had certain things that he's going to do we're just talking about pure finger patterns. But those are all people, as I try to be, who were mindful of the need for the internal musical dialogue that they're having to be what's really in charge at the end of the day. And I just think that what you see with Jarrett is his version of processing that experience, and I think he's well documented as having a fairly massive ego. You could make an argument that kind of diva stuff is completely warranted when you're dealing with somebody who's that brilliant, but there may be some self-indulgence there as well. It's kind of a hard question to answer authoritatively because everybody's going to have their own opinion about it. So,
I want to go back to that Spirits record. I believe had Jimi Hendrix or John Coltrane still been alive, I think they would have taken their ideas to other instruments. Kind of like what Keith Jarrett did, because I think those two musicians I just named were kind of at wit's end with where they were going before they died.
Yeah, I agree, especially with Coltrane. I could definitely see, and I think he did too. I think there's times on Love Supreme where he picked up some shells or something, or
even Alice Coltrane, she fluctuated, especially to
Well, look, what's really going on here? The old saying, composition is improvisation sped way up. Improvisation Composition is improvisation slowed way down with an eraser. And improvisation is composition sped way up. That is the idea. And the way that manifests is myriad, and complicated. To give you another example that to me is really in the same department, I have people come to me that are, let's just say, fans to some extent of my arranging and my writing, and they're basically asking, got any secrets, got any tips, how do you think of this, how do you think of that? They're kind of trying to get in there, and I can tell after I talk to them a little bit that these are people who, and we could discuss the reasons, doesn't really matter, but just to say they have given up trying to play at a very high level. They're gravitating towards composing and arranging, and that's kind of what they're going to do. There are some instances, maybe Maria Schneider would be a really great one, where that totally works. All right, I'm not aware of her having an instrument. She studied with Gil Evans, and the rest is history. She's amazing, but there's not that many Maria Schneiders out there. And what there are is a lot of people who are trying to become good writers, but they don't, for whatever variety of reasons, they don't find themselves able to make the commitment to also, in a parallel way, play at a very, very high level. The reason I'm mentioning that is because the secret that they're asking for, in my opinion, requires that you do the work and maintain a very, very high level of just actual playing musicianship. because that's where you get to know the space. You get to know the space of what happens when a band plays by playing. And that's the space that you need to know to then become an arranger or composer, where you're making decisions for something that's going to happen in real time. But you're making those decisions not in real time. You're trusting your ability to envision what's going to happen. If these notes are played, if these phrases, if this chart is played as I'm writing it, here is what is going to unfold when musicians do that. And if you don't play at a very high level, then it's going to be a lot harder to understand what that space needs to be, especially if you're talking about writing for music that has improvisation as its central energy. Its central reason for being is improvisation, but you then want to have a certain amount of compositional element to it. If you want to walk that balance, then you better know both of those things really, really well.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace. I'd like to personally thank the talented Laurence Hobgood for his time. Make sure you buy his brand new CD, Tesseterra, featuring the Ethel String Quartet. I'd like to personally thank Mr. Laurence Hobgood for his time. Also, I'd like to personally thank the staff and management at the Rubin. Also, I'd like to personally thank the members of the Solar String Quartet. As always, please visit my website, thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments, as well as like, share, and subscribe to my videos here on YouTube and Vimeo. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.